What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the build. In the last video, we finished up mounting our drivetrain. So the engine mounts are done, the transmission mounts done, the LS3 TH400 and Atlas transfer case are hung and nice and secure. Now it's time to come back here and start working on the rear half of our frame. So way early on in the build, we just chopped the frame, removed all of the unneeded section from the rear, but it's time to finish out this frame and get this thing ready to be a race chassis. Now the issue on Jeep Wrangler frames is the rear section just goes straight back here. And when we start trying to package some shocks, bypasses, we have to notch this and get it out of the way so we have plenty of clearance. So what we're gonna do in this video is create a custom back half kit. Now what we could do is just go with one of the aftermarket back half kits, but hey, for doing all this, why not build it ourselves? So as you can tell, I've already removed the lip from the tub right here. It's a good solid 2.5 inches that we removed. So this is going to be out of the way so we can create our frame rear cross member here that's also going to incorporate our body mount bolts. So we have a lot to do in this video, and more importantly, I want to finish this up so we can start designing our roll cage, because we need to know where it's going to terminate back here in the rear. So first things first, we have a piece of 3x2 steel square tubing. We're gonna make this rear cross member and then start working on our custom back half kit. First things first, we need to measure the width of our rear cross member, which is just right around 50 inches. Then we also have to take a measurement between our two body mounts so we can figure out where to drill the holes in our rear square cross member. Well, that was easy enough to make. Now it's time to make sure it actually fits. So the factory body mounts are not gonna fit. These are way too long. Since we're ditching all the factory mounts and whatnot, had to swing by Barton Bolt, local hardware store here in Oklahoma City, and got some. These are metric 14, I think by like 80 millimeter, but it's gonna be perfect, just enough to thread through this and catch into the factory body mount. So let's make sure all my measurements were correct. See if this bad boy fits up there. Beautiful. So the main reason I wanted to start with the rear cross member here is so we know where we're shooting for in regards to the frame rail. So we're gonna pull this back off because we have one more thing to add. We're gonna get a little fancy here. As you can tell, we have quite an assembly of Barnes 4-wheel drive weld washers over here, and it looks like these two are gonna fit perfectly. So what we're gonna do is weld these weld washers on. And what that's gonna do is strengthen the material right around our bolt hole. It's gonna distribute that clamping force a little bit better, and plus they just look freaking sick. So what we're gonna do is put the bolt through it, make sure everything's cleaned up and aligned, and put some hot metal glue on these weld washers. Super neat way to strengthen your bolt holes. Most aftermarket back half kits start way down here, but really the only thing we need is room for the coilover and bypass to be able to swing in whenever the axle swings down. That way it didn't contact the frame. So I don't want to go too far back. We're going to keep that big structure there, just cut enough away so we can slide some tube in here and go directly back to this cross member. So I think this is the spot. We're going to find out, but either way, it is time to cut. Well, I'm gonna have to run to the store because I am officially out of Sawzall blades, and we still have to cut this back just a little bit more. So I didn't realize that the frame actually contoured in a little bit right here. So we're gonna have to continue the cut back to here, because there's two options of how to run this frame back. We can either use square tubing or we can use round tubing, and both of them don't fit. They actually fit that piece, but that was before the contour. So that doesn't fit, and this doesn't fit. So I don't know which direction to go with until we cut it back and I can kind of look at my options. You know, the first option, a piece of 2-inch DOM tubing there and a piece of 1 3/4 on top actually fills the gap, or run with a piece of 3x2, which is what we just used, and run it back there. So Either way, I'm gonna take a break, run to the store, grab some Sawzall blades and cut this back about 1 more inch, and then take a look and figure out what kind of tubing material we're gonna use for the back half kit. So after grabbing a fresh blade, I was able to make that cut, and Mike and I started figuring out which material we wanted to use. Round tubing versus square tubing, and in the end it made more sense and turned out to be a lot cleaner using the square tubing. In order to actually bend square tubing, we did a multiple series of cuts. We actually made 7 cuts in the tubing so we would be able to bend it into the right direction we wanted to go to. Then we just put a bunch of tack welds down to hold it in place. Now we had to do the exact same thing on the opposite side of the tubing. That way it would come back straight towards the rearmost part of the frame cross member. So we made all those cuts, put it back under there, bent it into place, and then tack welded it in place. So with this metal, all the mill scale on there, it's important to make sure you grind all that off before you start welding it. So we did that, tack welded it in place, we were good to go. So we mocked it up, making sure everything was good, and everything looked fine. So I started welding all of this together, and let me tell you what, each one of those cuts had to be fully welded, and that just took a while. It was probably 30 to 40 minutes of just continuous welding. Actually, it probably wasn't even that much. It was like 20 minutes. But either way, it felt like a lot of welding, and it's about 95 degrees in the shop with the jacket on. Not too much fun. And to turn around, we had to grind all of those welds down. Now, luckily, I actually picked up one of the Harbor Freight, the Hercules 36 grit sanding discs, and let me tell you what, that stuff cut through the welds like they weren't even there. And just like that, we now have one side of our rear frame completed, and it's time to do the exact same thing on the other. And just like that, we are finished with our custom back half kit. Not finished, we still have a few small things to finish up with. You know, fish plate between the frame and our new section of frame, as well as fish plate the sections here that we did the pie cuts. But I am happy with this. There's a little bit of bracing on the top and bottom. It's fully welded in, as well as the back there. So we have a ton of clearance for our coilovers bypass and of course some bump stops as well. But as you can tell, the inside of the original frame is now even with the outside of our new frame. So we don't have to notch anything. We're gonna have a ton of clearance, and it actually sits up just a little bit higher than the factory frame rails do on a Jeep JK. So I'm happy with how this turned out. All we have to do is, you know, fish plate it, maybe add one more cross member in there, and we're gonna call this job done. But at this point, it is time to separate the frame and body once again to install our new TCI flex plate and torque converter. So this is a very fancy torque converter. I'm not gonna try to explain it, but TCI makes really good stuff, and this was quite expensive. So let's check it out. Oh boy, it's the never ending. When's it gonna end? Okay, there's a stack of like 10 of these things. But this is a fairly small converter, but it has anti-balloon plate, all kinds of goodies in there. But this is small, it's gonna spool up really quick. It's right around 3,000 to 3,400 stall. So paired with the, you know, cammed LS3, this baby should scream. I'll let Mike talk a little bit about it more. Either way, to get this installed, we're gonna separate the body and then, you know, separate the transmission and engine, and that should be the last time we have to touch that combo. We also have to install this Lokar locking dipstick. So according to Ultra4 rules, you have to have locking dipsticks on the engine and transmission. And what that is, you actually have to pull this little clip down before you can pull the dipstick out. So that's gonna prevent any kind of spillage during a rollover, but these things add up fairly quick. So that's something to think about. Not really, I mean, if you're doing all this, you're gonna be spending all kinds of money anyways, but little dipstick like this, so if you just try to yank it, it's not gonna come out unless you pull that collar down, and then you can check your oil. And they're pretty cool too. You know, they look nice, high quality, but they're like $100 each. So we have $200 in dipsticks on this setup. Either way, I'm rambling. Let's pull all the body mounts out, lift the tub up, get the new flex plate and torque converter installed. So this is one of the reasons that I want to design the roll cage so we can remove it. Situations like this, it's so much easier just to separate the body. You know, if this was all one rigid chassis and you can't separate the frame from the body, all of this has to be done from underneath. So he's gonna give the rundown on this converter, because I mean, all I know is it has anti-balloon plates. He's the guy that talked to the TCI rep, so.
So yeah, I want to thank Andre at Edelbrock. He hooked us up with 10-inch converter, spragless, steel stator, anti-balloon plates, and we're at about 3,500 on the stall. And then we also got a machined flex plate from TCI.
This flex plate is a lot more expensive than your typical. Like we were looking, like Jags has like $140 flex plates versus this one, which is almost double the cost. But it is SFI rated. You know, it's a machined flywheel instead of welded. So a lot of your typical, not flywheel, but flex plates, the tooth here, the teeth are just tack welded on. So this is a much nicer setup. Should be a lot stronger. It's balanced for extreme high RPMs, and then paired with the torque converter, it's kind of a no-brainer. So yeah,
Ought to rip.
it should. We shall see. So it is time to go ahead and put these in. Mike, for some reason, was thinking this is going to be a 3-hour job, but
I've got the timer going.
do you really?
Yeah.
No, you don't.
Yeah. Right.
I'm guessing an hour and a half max. I mean, I guess it depends how much I mess around with the GoPro.
Right now,
How long has it already been?
we are at 11 minutes so far.
11 minutes. All right, let's put the camera down and get these installed. Filling the converter with a quart or two. That way it's kind of pre-filled, to say the least. That way when it starts for the first time, the converter has fluid in there. So, you know, these things can hold anywhere from they can hold like 2 to 4 quarts, but we'll put one in there. It's gonna bubble down. So the bolts actually go thread through the converter, and then we threw nuts on the backside. Little drop of red Loctite on both 3-bolt converters. So those are done. Moving on to the next step is a new trans pan. So we had just the stock, you know, sheet metal pan on there. It's the shallow pan. Mike had this aluminum, little bit deeper of a pan, but the bolt holes weren't lining up. It was like offset just a little bit, enough to where the bolts didn't want to go in. So we zipped those over there in the drill press, and hopefully that's going to be enough. But since we have the pan off, it's time to go ahead and throw this Lokar shifter in. So all it is just a little locking dipstick, and then there's this rubber grommet. We're going to put a little bit of fluid on that, and then this threads in from the inside and it seals up. Things are moving along. I mean, not fast, but not slow. Slow and steady wins the race in regards to building, not the actual race. Can't even get a socket on there.
Why? Because of the filter?
No, the
Valve body?
yeah. And then this is gonna hit the sealing surface. With the transmission all buttoned up, it's time to circle back to the back half kit back here. So I did a little bit of work last night in the shop, capped the tops of both of these back sides, added a gusset back here, and then over here started kind of figuring out what we're gonna do for the roll cage tie-in over here on the frame. So this is a leaf spring outrigger from Barnes 4-wheel drive. Typically they would go on the underside of the frame, and that's where you would, weld a leaf spring hanger on a leaf spring vehicle. But if we flip it to the top of the frame, this is actually the perfect pad for the roll cage. And we're gonna talk about that in the video when we actually start up the roll cage. But the custom fish plates came in. These are actually from a local place, Tricked Toys in Moore, Oklahoma. Now he specializes in like lowering kits for Chevys, the C-notch kits where you notch the frame out, but he also has a plasma table and can create custom parts. So Mike and I swing by over there and we gave him some dimensions to make a custom fish plate, and we have it here. Now the only challenge is that we are gonna have to bend it to the contour of the frame here, but what this is gonna do is just really, once again, structurally, incorporate our factory frame into our new back half part of the frame. So I've got this clamped down. We're gonna put a few tack welds and then slowly try to bend this over and tack weld it so it's nice and flush with the frame. So we have 4 sets of these for the inside of both frame rails. And then I also have some Barnes 4-wheel drive fish plates to, we might use those on the back side because the curve back here is a lot more drastic and the Barnes fish plates are a little bit smaller. So we might go with those on the inside, but either way, it is time to get the outside fish plates mocked up, tack welded, and then welded in place. I'm not gonna weld the entire perimeter of this just because that's a ton of weld and a lot of heat in this section. So what we'll do is just little stitch welds across certain sections of this. Let's break out the welder and get these fish plates hot metal glued on. I might not end up fish plating the inside of the frame rails just with how much we've welded on this. We've welded the entire perimeter of the frame. We added the 2 little gussets on the top and bottom, and then the outside being fish plated. I don't think this is gonna go anywhere. There's really not too much that's gonna be distributing the load on the rear half of this, the back half. The only thing we really have to worry about is impacts from the bottom trying to bend this up. And the more I was thinking of it, I would love to overbuild this thing, but since it is a race vehicle, there's a balance between weight savings and just overbuilding this thing in regards to strength. We're not building a rock bouncer, even though we probably will be bouncing rocks. I don't want this thing to start weighing a ton. With how it sits, I think we're gonna be happy with it. I don't think it's gonna move. Later on, once we get the suspension and the axles in, we can lift up, we can actually put jack stands on the rear crossmember and lift up the front of the Jeep and see if this rear part of the frame has any flex. But we're not gonna be able to do any of that until, we're further along with the build. And as it sits now, I am happy with it. So we do have a plan for this rear body section. All of this is going to be removed, but we do have to keep in mind that this holds the body together. So we're actually gonna replace this with tubing. That's gonna be in a future video. It's gonna be pretty neat, and it's also going to incorporate our fuel cell over there and hold it all perfectly. So that's gonna be about it for this video, guys. We did get a lot done. Forward progress is being made. Like always, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and go down to the comments below and let me know what you guys would like to see next. I know a lot of people wanna see the roll cage, but I don't really want to start it until we have all the ducks in a row and everything planned out. That way it's a do it once kind of situation. I will see you guys next week. Thanks for watching. See you later.